and then the yellow, because it's quite a small area. If I do that, the likelihood of me pulling the black in from the edges and muddying my yellow is going to be quite high. So that's what we're going to do. The Pablos, I would class the Pablos as a hard pencil. They're quite velvety, so the laydown is really quite velvety, but they're a hard pencil. So I don't know whether you remember on Sunday when I was pressing quite hard with my light fast and the end kept breaking. You're not really going to get that with the Pablo and the Polychromos. They're hard, dry pencils, which I really like actually for blending. You'd think that the soft pencils would be better for blending, but actually I prefer these harder, drier ones. So we're going to start off with this yellow, and we're just basically going to come in and we're just going to colour in the eye. So we've got this sort of shape, so nice and gentle pressure, as you can. You might have to go a little bit harder. It just depends on the surface that you're using. But the one I'm using today, actually, it takes this nice light pressure. The surface I'm using today, actually, it works like a hot press. So I was using a hot press yesterday, and I didn't actually like it very much. I don't know what it was because I just grabbed it out of my drawer. But I've chosen a different one today. I'm just going to come in and do the other eye. So you can see I'm leaving the pupil area out. Now, if you were doing this much bigger, then you'd think about all of the different details and everything in the eyes. But with it being so small, we don't need to do that. I'm going to bring a little bit of green in there as well once we've got the black in. But basically, we've got the yellow in there. So the surface I'm using today is actually a Rising museum board. It's just like a hot press. It's the similar sort of surface to a hot press. But like I say, the one that I was using yesterday, I wasn't that enamoured with. I have no idea what it was. so we've got those little yellow bits in. Looks like it's glowing in the dark. Next, we're going to use the black. Now, we can use any black. I've got the light fast black. Actually, my preference would be a Polychromos black, purely because it's harder and it will keep a point for longer. And if I press a little bit harder with it, it's not going to break. Whereas the light fast, they break quite easily. It's not because they're a substandard pencil, they're not. It's just that they're a lot softer. So I'm going to use my light fast, and we're just going to come in around the eye. Again, it's tiny, so we don't need to put detail or anything like that in at this point. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of the black in there, and then I'm going to come around the top so that we get the shape of the eye in there. Again, I'm trying not to end up in the yellow. And you can see at the top, it's kind of a little bit wider at the top. I'm just going to come down here, and then let's just bring a little bottom bit in there. Now, I tend to always start with the eyes, you don't have to, but that's kind of what I do. And then because I'm here, I'm going to just put the little pupil in. Now, there is a bit of a catch light on the pupil. It's up to you as to whether you put it in, because it is tiny weeny. There's a little bit of dark on the top. A little bit of, see? I'm just going to switch to my Polychromos black, because I know it's not going to break. And like I say, it's just with it being a really soft pencil. I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to leave, there's like a little bit of a catch light in the top, I'm just going to leave that. I've got a question here. The learned from yesterday, I found that the hot press, the colour is a lot lighter than when I've used pastel matte. Does this sound right? So this is all about pressure and layering. So when you've used pastel matte, what happens is the surface attracts the pigment beautifully. So you'll find that you only have to use very, very light pressure and it will attract the pigment, and the pigment will just kind of come off on the surface. With a hot press paper, you have to layer and you have to press a little bit harder, and that's why it's probably looking a little bit sort of fainter. Okay, let's come over to the other eye now, and we're just going to do exactly the same thing here. So I'm just going to bring, you can see the light fast black is actually darker, but I feel like I've got a little bit more control with my Polychromos. And once you kind of get into your pencils, you really can feel the difference. At first, it's just like a pencil. But once you kind of get going and get cracking, you really will start to feel the difference in all of the different brands. You have soft ones, you have hard ones. Soft ones obviously don't keep a point as well as the hard ones do. The hard ones are great on surfaces like pastel matte. Some people just swear by using Prisma. Nothing wrong with that. Prisma are a great pencil. The reason I don't use them is because they're just too soft for me. And it's very much about personal preference over anything really. Personal preference and budget. I started off with WH Smith pencils back in 2015, 16, and soon realised that I needed some that were better because the pigment was so faint. They were very hard pencils, but the pigment was very weak. You couldn't get a lot of vibrancy out of them. Okay, so we've got those little eyes in. Now I want to move over to the olive yellow. So it's the Pablo olive yellow. That's sort of greeny colour. They look very similar, but one's definitely a green and one's definitely a yellow. Okay, and all we're going to do is we're just going to touch a little bit of this green into the eyes. So when I say touch, it's just like a dab. So you're just going to kind of, because it's such a small area, we're just going to sort of put the pencil on the green. You might have to press a little bit harder to make it show up. And we're just going to dab a little bit into there. Just so that we get kind of a bit more of contrast in the eye there. So you get a little bit of a shadowy bit on the top. Up there. And that's pretty much it. So now we're going to come down to the beak, because we've got these two colours. We might as well stick with them. So we're going to come down to the beak, and we're just going to put that little beak in. So again, I'm just going to sort of tweak my graphite a little bit there. We're going to start off with the light yellow glaze. And we're just going to kind of draw that V in, the bottom of the beak in. So I'm just going to gently, as light a pressure as you can, so that you're actually getting the colour on the paper. If you're going really light and you can't see the colour, you need to go a little bit harder. But if you're getting like a lot of colour down, then it might be that you just need to reduce your pressure a little bit. So we're just drawing that little V there. Okay, and then we're going to move over to that green. So the olive yellow. And we're just going to put that little bit of green up on the top here. You can see there's a sort of like a paler bit on the top, so we're going to leave that very top bit. And we're almost going to sort of draw almost like a tunnel. We're just going to start at this side, make a curve, and come down the other side. So you're going to start on this side, curve it round, and come down the other side. So you're just kind of drawing these little shapes over the top of the beak there. And then I'm just going to go a little bit stronger with my pressure on the edge. In there, I've got the yellow bit, a little bit stronger. I can bring there's another green in there as well, the earth green we can bring in as well. And then what I want to do is just bring a little bit in around the, it's like he's got a little smiling mouth, isn't it? And then that beak will start to actually look like it's coming alive. So I'm going to use the dark sepia. And we're just going to bring in that little bit of like a little bit of a mouth. It's not a mouth, it's just the owl's, the shape. So we're just going to come down the side of the beak there. And we're going to come down the side of this beak here. and we're just going to sort of fill it in. So what I'm doing is I'm just doing that with my hand. That's all I'm doing to get that sort of feeling of the feathers. So I'm just going do, and then I'm just going to colour that bit in. And then I'm going to do exactly the same here, in there, just jiggling it about. And then we're going to come down here, just look at the shape that we've got there. So it's like a sort of like a wide V. And we can darken that up as well. So we're just going to come into here. Okay, and then we've got sort of like a little bit of a mouth there. So talking through how I chose the colours for the workshop, was it swatches or from using Adobe Photoshop suggestions? No. So I don't swatch, and I don't use Photoshop or anything like that. I know some artists do, they go in and they pick a colour and they pull it out and they go, this is the colour. For me, colour pencil is all about layering. There's never just one colour. And I've got to a point now where I can look at something and I can go, I'm going to use those colours. So when I looked at this little owl, I can see a lot of sort of pale greys. So I'm going to use some kind of a grey. Now the greys are quite warm when you look at them. They're sort of, they're kind of browny, more on the browny yellowy side than a blue side. So if they were more bluey, then they would be a cold grey. These ones are quite warm greys. And then we've got the brown, and it's just a case of the brown's quite dark, so I'm going to have a dark brown. I tried to choose colours that we could use for all three pieces rather than give you loads and loads of different colours. So I chose the browns that I'd already got. And then I also put in the raw umber. So this is the raw umber here. It's quite a yellowy brown. And this is just going to be really nice for these little wingy bits here. And that's basically how I chose it. And it's how I choose each of my colours. Colours palette for my pieces. Normally what I would do is I wouldn't actually sit down before I draw a piece and choose all of my colours. And I would highly recommend that you don't do that either. I would just have some colours next to you and just play with them. Understand a little bit about colour theory. It was a lovely question today, why did you use a purple instead of an orange or a red? And that's because purple, it was on another tutorial, but that's because the purple is brilliant for creating a shadow on the top of oranges, sort of gingery kind of coloured animals. So just understanding a little bit about colour theory, just the basics, is really good. And of course, there's tons of stuff like that in Ignite. I've got my whole, I did a workshop on colour at Christmas, and that's all in there. So, you don't have to go like the whole hog with colour theory. You can go really, really into it and get very technical. I just like to keep things simple. So I just kind of pick and choose colours as I go, and I mix on my drawing, which, of course, it takes a little while to get there, but I never swatch. I might have a little scribble on the edge of my page or something. I'm like, is that the right colour? But I don't go through and swatch everything and say, right, I'm using these. I find it kind of stilts things a little bit. Right, so I'm just going to use this second green. It's earth green. So this one has got a pencil extender on. A pencil extender that actually is the middle of my dog poo bags. They make fantastic pencil extenders, particularly for polychromos and Pablos. But just the little cardboard middles. They're fantastic. It's so tempting to buy extenders. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of this green onto the top of the beak area here. So again, we're just going to kind of layer it in over the top. And we're just going to leave the middle bit a little bit paler. Just going to layer that in. Okay, and don't worry about it looking, it's like, it doesn't look quite centred or anything like that. Don't worry about it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at all of the light areas. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the warm grey one. So this is my little warm grey one, so it's quite tiny. I like to use my pencils sort of quite long. I like them to sort of sit in my hand, so this is getting a little bit too short for me, but I've still got a little extender on there. And what we're going to do is we're just going to press this colour in, particularly where it sits, where there's brown, because what I want to do is I actually want to bring the brown in over the top and have it sort of not going over the top of the grey, if that makes sense. So we're going to colour in, but we're also going to create some little indents as well. So we're going to start on the top of the head. I'm just going to very gently, again, just take a little bit of this out, just because otherwise it kind of just gets in the way of it. I'm not going to take it all out. And we're going to start around the top of the eyes here. So, and we can come back in and we can put little bits of black in and all of that kind of stuff to create details. So I've got a question here about Castle Arts. So all I'm doing here is I'm just literally just up and down like that, and we're just bringing that colour in. So it's just like colouring in. And I can go round and round. And then don't worry about the details in this frilly bit here. We can bring the darker grey and all the black in there, and we can bring the frilly bits in, those little detail bits on top of. When you're creating realism, what I tend to find is you almost work from the inside out. So you're kind of working from the down, if you're drawing an animal or a bird, down by the skin, and then you're just building it up with the layers, building up, and then your final layers are going to be the top bits, which are the details. So Castle Arts pencils, I think they are one that I recommend. They're a good budget pencil. They're not Lightfast, which is why they're a budget pencil. And Lightfast means that if you, they're not going to last, basically. The colours will fade. So you've got to be very, very careful about where you hang your drawings and how you kind of treat them. So, if you're wanting to sort of sell your work or do commissions or anything like that, it's a very good idea to invest in really good quality artist pencils. So I'm just going to come down here again. You can see, you're probably thinking, well, hang on a second, you're going over all of the, there's lots of little lines there and lots of little details and stuff. I'm working underneath those details. So just draw that little mask around his face, and we can bring those other little details in on the top. So the next thing I want to do is just bring these little spots in on the top here. Now, if you want, you can make them exactly the same as the photograph. I'm not going to make them exactly the same as the photograph. Call me lazy, I don't know, but I'm just not. So I'm just going to make some little marks that they're quite random. These little sort of marks. They're not sort of really. I don't think it matters if you kind of put little marks and they're a little bit different to what's on the photograph. Sometimes it does matter. Like these feathers down here, these are a little bit more important to get. So they're all correct. On his head, it looks like they're kind of going everywhere. So what I'm doing is I'm pressing quite hard. Now, this looks quite dark, and you might be thinking, well, they look white. Once we get the dark in around it, these are going to stand out. So I'm pressing into the paper as well as creating the mark. So I'm pressing quite hard because when I put the brown on, I don't want it to cover. Like what I tried to do with the hair, with the whiskers. That's what we're trying to do here. So I'm just going to come around the edge there. So you don't want it all over the head. You just want these little marks to go in here. So indenting is a really great technique for hot press paper or a board like this. It's a really, really fantastic technique because what it does is it stops your colour going in over the top. I'll just demonstrate here. So if I put that, oh gosh, I was pressing very hard. I put that there. It'd be better if I did it with white, really. Let me just try it with white, and then you'll see a bit better. Oh gosh, that's got something on the end of it. Comedy of errors. Let me switch that around, you don't see all of that rubbish. That's the thing, you're doing like white on the top of something. So let's just do that. Let's just put some whiskers in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring a little bit of grey over the top of it. It's a really, really great way of getting some marks. Now, some people do use indenting for fur. They do all their fur indenting. I don't tend to, because I tend to use other techniques for fur, but it can be really, really, really effective, really effective. It's a case of more is better than less. Sometimes less is more, not when it comes to indenting. So we've got his little head there, and now we're going to start to bring some of the brown in. So we're going to use these two pencils. We're going to use the Lightfast Natural Brown, and we're going to use we're going to use one at a time. So the natural brown, and then we're also going to use the raw umber. But we'll use the natural brown first. Okay, so we're going to start up on the top of the eye there. Do you want to put the natural brown banner up, Maze? I'm going to start up on the owl, on the top of the eyes here. I'm just going to start to bring in that sort of browny colour. And you'll find that your pencils are quite, they'll feel a little bit different. So what I would say is kind of work around your light areas, just in case they don't indent properly. And we're just going to kind of pull this up here. I'm just going to work around these little white areas. So I've got a question here that's how do I sort my pencils in my studio? So they're all in jars. They're either in jars or they're in drawers, or they're in boxes. And I tend to keep the jars by colour. So I've got reds, blues, that kind of thing. And then if you looked at I've got a trolley with a load of jars on it and mugs and everything. And if you looked at them, you think there's no kind of reasoning around how I'm storing any of my colours. And you'd be absolutely correct. There is no reasoning how they're stored on the trolley that I use on a day-to-day basis. I've just got a ton of colours that just end up in jars. Usually what happens is I go through and I sort them all back into their relevant jars. But half the time it takes too long. And by the time I'm like, oh, I need to sort my pencils out. I'm like, I need to draw, so I'm just not going to bother. So I end up with some that have just a whole range of different colours, and there's literally no rhyme or reason as to why the colours are together. And then of course I can't find them, so it's because I'm very disorganised. But on an organised day, I've got all of my colours in jars, and they're all still by colour. And then I kind of have jars that have got some of my core colours, the ones that I use a lot. Okay, so you can see there's, I'm just kind of working around these little spots, and it's working quite nicely actually. And I can come around the edge here as well. I did a little video this morning. I've finished a commission piece today, and I just wanted to remind everybody that realism doesn't look real at the beginning. It looks messy, and it looks ugly, and it's something that we kind of have to remind ourselves that you can't get realism with one pencil stroke or a couple of pencil strokes. It takes layers, and it takes time. And sometimes we can get really upset with ourselves because our drawing isn't looking realistic. But just give it a little bit of time, give it a little bit of layering, and it will all start to come. Okay, so I'm going to bring. I think I'm going to bring a little bit of colour in from this eye here as well. You can see where there's sort of like a little bit of sort of shading there. I'll bring that in. I'm just shading very, very gently, so I'm using very light pressure. I'm just going to come in through here, nice and gently. There's another good question here, actually. Do colour pencils have an expiration date? And honestly, I think if you kind of keep them generally, in a well-ventilated area where they're not too hot or too cold, I think they're fine. I mean, I've heard of some people who've got their pencils out from 50 years ago, and they're absolutely fine. So, I think it's just a case like with everything. Just be careful how you're storing them. But I mean, I've got some pencils. I think my oldest pencils are 10 years old. I couldn't tell you which ones they are. Probably some greens because I don't use greens that often. So tips for indenting. So try not to be really, particularly when we're doing something like the head here. Try not to be really, really specific and get your shapes all in there. Just give yourself a little bit of slack, and just kind of put some dots and stuff in. If you were going to indent in around the little beak area around here. You need to put more marks in than less, because if you put too few marks in, it's just not going to look right. Now, I wouldn't use indenting for, if you were thinking about drawing like an animal, fur and stuff like that, I wouldn't use indenting for fur, because I'm not good enough at indenting. I don't have the patience. I want to be using my pencils. I don't want to be kind of making marks. So I just keep mine indenting for things like this and for whiskers, which work really, really well. But yeah, just try not to overwhelm yourself with things. If it's not working, don't worry. Just put a few little blobs in and it'll be fine. That's one thing that I don't have a challenge with is perfectionism. I'm never hard on myself. If something doesn't look quite right, I'm like, oh, you know what, it'll be fine. It looks fine. I'm never sort of sitting there for hours and hours getting all berating myself because it's not exactly how I wanted it. Because that's not, for me, that's not the reason why I draw. The reason why I draw is because of how it makes me feel. So I'm just going to come up there a little bit. Oops, there. So I'm just kind of drawing these little shapes. And yeah, it's got a complicated little face, but just breathe, just enjoy. Can indenting be done with dark colours? Well, yes, but you don't need to. There's absolutely no reason to do indenting with dark colours, unless I suppose you were using a black paper, maybe. But otherwise, on a white surface, there's no reason to use it with dark colours. But maybe on a black paper, maybe, yeah. And so I have a whole set of pencils. I'm just going to come in over the top of the eyes here. We're just going to bring some tiny little sort of feathery marks in. So we're starting to bring some of the little details in. Just wisp them in. You don't have to get them perfect. You're just bringing a little sort of tiny bit of an idea of the little feathers that are there. They look more like hairs, really, more than feathers. And I'm just going to bring them around there as well. Just little lines coming in, sort of fanning around. If we were doing this owl much bigger, then of course we would go into way more detail in these details. But with it being quite small, we can just sort of do the bare minimum, which is quite nice, really. We're still using the techniques that we'd use if you were doing something much bigger, but we get it done quicker, which is great for this kind of thing. Okay, I'm just going to come around here again. I'm just going to darken around the edge of the hair in there. So we start to get a real feel for that little beak. No need to indent on pastel matte because you can get light over dark on pastel matte. Now, some artists do indent on pastel matte. I don't. And that's because what happens when you indent on pastel matte is it actually disturbs the surface of the paper and you get this really weird, I feel you get these really weird marks. So I don't like to indent on pastel matte. I prefer to use my light over dark, which you can do really easily. Okay, let's just bring a little bit of that in. And okay, so now I'm going to use my raw umber. I'm just going to go in over the top of the other brown, and we're just not over the top of everything. We're just going to kind of glaze a little bit, and hopefully what should happen is it will just skip over. Can you see I'm kind of glazing? So when I talk about glazing, I'm using the lightest pressure I possibly can, and I'm just sort of skimming my pencil over the entire surface. So it's just pulling everything together. I'm using very, very, very light pressure. Polychromos are brilliant for glazing. You can just add a tiny weeny little bit of colour, and it makes all of the difference. If you're drawing sort of like a black Labrador, once you've got all of your layers in, you could come in with like a bright pink or a yellow or something like that, and you can just glaze over the top of your black, and you can get these very subtle changes in the fur colour. It's lovely. So just glazing very gently, super, super light pressure, and we're just adding a little bit more colour in and around the little owl here. I'm going to bring a little bit more black in as well. I'll bring the black in a little bit later, but that's basically his little head. So now we're going to start working on the rest of the body. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to start with the paler colour, the grey, and then we're going to come through and we're going to put the browns in. So the pencil sharpener that I've used today is the Derwent Superpoint. I'll show it to you. It's likely that it's going to, so it's this one. You see that? Derwent Superpoint. It's a hand crank sharpener. And one of the things that I don't like about it is that, can you see that it puts little teeth marks on it? But it does give you a really good, even, long, sharp point, which is really lovely, I have to say. So yeah, it's one of three that I use. So I use the Derwent Superpoint, I use the Swordfish Multipoint, which is a big electric sharpener, and I use a little tiny handheld one. Okay, so let's go in again with the grey, the warm grey. I'm just going to sharpen mine, but I think I'll leave it as it is. And we're just going to bring the warm grey in again. So I'm going to go sort of relatively hard. Not that I'm kind of indenting here, but it's sort of, I just want to get the colour in really. So sort of like a medium pressure I'm using here. And then we're going to come down into here. Now this is where maybe you might start panicking, thinking, oh my goodness, I've got all of these feathers. How am I going to make them look like feathers? This is warm grey one, sorry. Warm grey one. That's it. Yeah, sorry, because we've got the light fast warm grey as well. Sorry about that. I'm just going to take away just the edge here. I'm not too worried about the lines inside because we're going to go a little bit darker there. And actually what you could do is you could just colour the whole thing in grey if you wanted, because we're going to get the brown in over the top anyway. So I'm just going to come down here. You can see I'm really not worrying too much about getting all these feathers perfectly shaped or anything like that. That's really not the aim of what we're doing here. I am sort of, looking at the shapes of them and going, oh, there's kind of a line of them here and there's a little bit pointy. These ones over here are much more specific, but these ones, they're more sort of blobby feathers. And we just want the look and feel of them really. Oh, I'm going a little bit too quickly. Okay, so I will try and slow down a little bit. What I don't want you to do is get hung up on trying to draw everything perfectly, which is kind of what happens when you go too slowly. So, and this is very much part of sort of how I draw. It might seem super speedy, but actually it's just a little bit sketchy. So all we're doing is we're just filling in the shapes. So I'm just going to come down here, and I'm just going to fill these little shapes in here. So and the thing is that if you have time to overthink, you will overthink. And you'll start going, that shape's wrong, this shape's wrong, I need to rub that out. That's not what this is about. This is just about the joy of just putting pencil on the paper and just creating something. So I'm just going to come down here. So you can see I've kind of got the line arts in here a little bit. We're going to have a bit of a break in 5 minutes anyway. So, if you need to sort of catch up a little bit, hopefully I'm going a little bit more slower for you now. So just literally just blobbing these colours in. And it's coming down there. You need to join one of my speed draws. Oh dear, that'll scare the life out of you. And they're done, I do them speedy for a reason. The speed draws I do speedy for a reason because it just doesn't give you any chance to think at all. And it's just like bang, 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 bang. But they're really, really good fun. Okay, so I'm kind of using my pencil round and round. Yes, there are some like little lines in the feathers, but we can put those in afterwards. We can put those shapes in after with a darker pencil. We can just kind of draw those sort of, it's like almost like lines across. It's just coming through here. Bring a little bit in there. And then around sort of like the bottom area, it's sort of like quite fluffy. You can see I'm just using my pencil backwards and forwards. In there. Okay, so I'm just going to bring a little bit into there as well. You can see where that's sort of quite a good place to finish almost there because we've got that line of the wing coming down. And then of course we've got this darker area down here. Let me just bring a little bit of that grey into there too. So what you could do is, you could have just filled the whole thing in with the grey. You could have just blocked it all in with the grey. And then your brown you could bring in over the top and create the shapes. What we've done here is I've kind of gone around the shapes. And we're going to do the same as what we did up on the top there. I'm just going to take my grey and I'm just going to use it a little bit harder. And I'm just going to sort of slightly burnish the grey, the brown up here. So harder pressure, I'm just going to burnish over the top. It'll just push everything together and just make his head look a little bit more, And then I'm going to bring some black in there as well afterwards. And we'll work on, just going to bring a little bit of that grey in here actually while we're at it. And we'll work on a little bit more of the frilly bits. We'll get the wing done, and then we'll get all of this bit, we'll get some more details in there. So I think that's a good place. I think that's a good place to stop. Basically, if you just want to run the video, and I'll see you in a couple of minutes. Hello. I don't know about you, but the world's felt a bit wobbly lately, hasn't it? Everything feels like it's moving fast, things are changing, and sometimes it's hard to find something solid to hold on to. Something that's just yours. And that for me is what drawing has always been about. A place to breathe, a way to slow down, something that reminds me I'm still here, I'm still me. That's what Ignite's all about. It's not just about learning how to draw fur or blend colours or master that tricky bit of shading, though yes, you'll do all of that too. It's about carving out time for yourself. It's about reconnecting with the part of you that loves to create, that feels proud when you finish a piece, that gets excited to pick a pencil up again. And I've seen what happens when people join. I've watched someone go from I'm not artistic to hanging their drawings on the wall. I've seen tears of joy from people who never thought they could draw an animal, and now they're sending portraits to friends and family. I've had people tell me Ignite gave them purpose again, something to look forward to, a reason to get up, brew a cuppa, and spend time doing something just for them. So if you felt even a flicker of that today, I just want to say you're allowed to want more of it. You're allowed to say yes to something that fills you up. You're allowed to put yourself back on the list. We've got space for you. Come join us at Ignite and let's keep that spark glowing brightly. And if you join before 11:59 p.m. UK time tonight, you'll also get my Backgrounds 101 ebook as a free bonus. It's packed with pages of tips, inspiration, and techniques to help you add depth and atmosphere to your colour pencil pieces. And it's yours just for saying yes to yourself today. Can't wait to welcome you in. We're back. You stood up and clenched your fingers and, I don't know, done some leg lifts or something. We're back drawing it out a little out, and we're going to carry on with the warm grey. We're just going to pull in the warm grey bits on this side as well of the wing down in here. So I've just got a couple of little questions here actually. So how do you know you're using the right lights relative to the darks? Now, what will happen is, to begin with, you won't be using the right darks. Very, very few people will get values straight away, and actually it might take years to get your values, to understand your values. What I find is a really, really good idea is to get your darkest darks in quite quickly. And your darkest darks are obviously around the eyes. We've got some pretty dark areas kind of around the beak here. We've got some dark areas down here. Because if you get your darkest darks in, and your darkest dark is normally something of a value like black. You know, we can see it down here, we can see it in here, we can see it kind of around some of these bits here in the eyes and everything. You can then make a judgment against that darkest dark as to how light your lights need to be. Values are the most important thing when it comes to realistic drawing. You might think that it's all about the details. It's not at all. You can have a drawing that has got so many details, every single tiny detail in it, and the values are incorrect or not there, and your drawing is not going to look realistic. And you can have a drawing that's got all of the values correct and no details, and it's going to look realistic. So your values are super, super important. That's actually a whole lesson in the Colour Pencil Foundations course. I've got a whole I think it's about three chapters, I think, on values because they're so important. So I'm just going in over the top of these little rounded feathers. Now I'm being a little bit more careful here. You can see I'm kind of drawing them in the direction that they should be in. So I'm still just kind of colouring them in, but I'm just being careful that I'm actually putting them where they should be, because these ones, I think it's important that we get these correct, these little feathers here. You know, they're not sort of as random as the ones on the head, and these ones on the body here. These ones are, they're much more symmetrical. And because we're small, we don't need to put all of the feathery details in. You know, if you were doing this as a big portrait, yes, you would be zooming in, you're getting all of those details in. But this is really lovely because we can just concentrate really on the values, which I was just saying are really, really, really key. And then we've got, how am I going to save whites on feathers? So that's what we're doing here. These are the whites. You know, this grey, this is the lightest colour. You might be thinking the lightest colour is white. Actually, none of these feathers are white. They're all this sort of mid-grey. And then when we burnish, should we go in the direction of the fur? No, not necessarily. Normally, what happens when you burnish, you go round and round. Because you use a blunt pencil, and you just be pressing hard, and you're pressing all of your layers into each other. So it's not blending. It's more like you're just squashing everything into the tooth. And you would burnish at the end of a drawing, or nearly at the end of a drawing. So you don't want to do it too early on, because what can happen is if you burnish, you can end up using all of the tooth up, and then you can't get any more layers in. So which is obviously a bit of a problem. So you do that. Oops, hang on a second. I think I'm going to be okay. My phone's just gone on to low battery. I might have to plug it in a minute. You can do, in fact, let me just do that. Oh no, of course that's not the same. You'd hope, wouldn't you, that an iPad and an iPhone would have the same charger, but no, you have to have different ones. I just put that in. Okay, so and I've got a really nice question here. What are the most difficult subjects? The most difficult subjects will differ from person to person. I've heard it say that horses are one of the most difficult subjects to draw. Personally, I don't find that, but then I've had horses all of my life. I love horses. I thought I was a horse when I was a child. And I don't find them difficult to draw at all. But they do have sort of challenging faces because they've got a lot of lumps and bumps, and the hair kind of moves around a lot and it changes direction, and that's kind of what makes them so quite difficult to draw. I think humans, a human portrait I think they are difficult to draw. Challenging, particularly around skin tones, all of that kind of stuff. Is somebody asking what's the alternative for Prismacolor for warm grey 1? I don't know. It's in the materials list. I've given you a load of alternatives. So if you look on the materials list, you'll be able to see all of the alternatives that I've given you. Okay, I'm just going to bring a little bit more grey in there, and we're going to come in with I'm actually going to come in with the black, and we're just going to outline some of those feathers and put some of those darkest darks in. So whatever black you've got, I'm going to use it says light black, I'm actually going to use my polychromos black because I just prefer it. And I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to create the feather lines. So this is going to look really dark against what we've got. And that's what I was saying before, it's really good to get these darkest darks in, because then you can work out how light your lights need to go. If you don't have your darkest darks in, the risk is that everything will end up being too light, and it will end up being too light because we as humans, we just tend to go lighter on everything. It's just what happens. So I'm just going to colour in this little bit in here. This is sort of like a very dark area here. So I'm using sort of a little bit stronger pressure in there just to get that dark bit in. And then I'm going to come down here and bring these little sort of wing bits in here as well. So just kind of sketch that in. So I think there's sort of like a couple of little wee bits in there. Again, I don't suppose it really matters. We're not drawing a scientific sketch or anything like that. I think it'll be fine. Good. And then I'm going to come up to here, and I'm going to bring some of these little darker areas in here as well. So colour pencil, sadly, gets a bit of a rap when it comes to mediums that are in exhibitions and all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, there's a little bit of snobbiness around it, and you know, it's not seen as a medium that you know you kind of have in museums and galleries and all that kind of stuff. It is changing, which is great. You know, we've had a few. I think there's been a portrait of the year artist that was using colour pencil, and colour pencils are getting better and better and better. You know, they're becoming much more archival and light fast. But no, unfortunately, they still have a little bit of a hard time when it comes to competing against oil and pastel and watercolour and all that kind of stuff, which is a shame because they're an amazing medium. It's just putting a little bit more of that black in there. So I'm just kind of bringing that darker colour in, and then we'll come back and we'll bring those details in. So next, let's just bring this dark area in here as well. I've got those little feet that we're going to do. So I'm just going to go round and round. So small pencil strokes, medium pressure, round and round, just to get that solid texture in. You might have to put another layer in just to make it really, really black. We can put some brown in there as well, just to make it a little bit richer. Normally you wouldn't just use black on its own because it can be a little bit flat. But the polychromos black isn't a brilliant black. I like it because of how it, you know, it keeps a point. But you know, you normally use it with another colour. So if you master animals and wildlife, I think landscape or cityscapes will be easier. Well, I think anything is possible if you have a want to do it. So if you want to do landscapes and you learn the techniques of colour pencils, you can draw anything you want because you've got passion for it. And it's why I love drawing animals and I love drawing people. And I don't particularly like drawing still life and stuff like that because I just don't have the passion for it. And I think if you've got passion for something, you can do anything. You know, which is the same as anything in life, really, isn't it? So yeah, I think, you know, if you want to do it, then you will. Okay, so we're going to move on to using the natural brown again. So when I talk about light fast, I mean how long the pencil is going to stay true to its colour. So if I had a block of colour and I put it in, and pencils like Derwent and Caran d'Ache, they're all tested to standard, and they're actually tested in the Arizona desert, in the bright sunlight and the heat. And if the colours fade, then they're not light fast, and if they don't fade, then they're light fast. And you'll find that a lot of the cheaper pencils will actually fade within a matter of days. And these pencils are guaranteed to be light fast for sort of over 100 years. You know, so yeah, it's definitely worth getting the more light fast pencils. Right, so we're going to use the brown, and we're just going to come into the body of the owl here, and we're just going to start to kind of sketch in the sort of the little brown bits. So just kind of following along from your reference photo. So you're looking at your reference photo, you're looking back at your drawing, and then you're kind of just plotting in some of these little areas of colour. Again, please don't feel you have to copy the photograph exactly. You're kind of just creating something that's got a look and feel. So you can see I'm kind of just using single pencil strokes, which is sort of a little bit feathery. And I want to get some brown in there, and I want to leave some of the little lighter areas free of colour. Doesn't matter if we get the dark bits in the wrong place. As long as it looks like an owl, that's all that really matters at this point. Now, if we were doing like a scientific drawing and everything had to be perfect, then yes, absolutely, we would be really looking at the structure of the feathers, all of that kind of thing. But something like this, where we're doing a little sort of sketchy drawing, and we're just sort of practicing the techniques that you'd use for larger, more in-depth drawings, we don't need to worry too much about it. Let's just come down here so you can sort of get an idea of the structure and the pattern that kind of comes through. You know, and I think at first it almost feels easier to try and copy something exactly, but it can be very limiting to try and copy something exactly because you get hung up on it and you get worried that I put that in the wrong place and I put that in the wrong place. And actually, you know, if you just sort of give yourself a little bit of grace and you just sort of go, do you know what, I'm just gonna see what happens if I just sort of play around and do it. You know, just see what happens if I just put a bit of this here and a bit of that there, and I'm not too hard on myself about getting everything absolutely spot on. And you'll find that it's much more enjoyable. I mean, you will find patterns that are, you know, very easy to sort of copy. So we've got this sort of pattern that's coming down here, where we've got a little bit of that blobbiness coming in there, and then we've got this pattern coming in down here as well. We've got this little bit of brown here. We've got a round a bit there. You know, but if you get it a little bit wrong, it doesn't matter. And then you can sort of go, oh, I just want that to look a little bit more feathery, so we'll just put a little bit more of a sort of feathery edge on that. And then we're just going to come down here. And sometimes you do get lost. Sometimes you're like, I don't know where on earth I am. And at that point, the best thing to do is just stop, take a breath, get up, go and have a walk around, get a cup of tea, something like that, and then come back and just sit with your drawing and sit with your reference photo and just look and go, right, hang on a second now. And you can even, gosh, I can't remember who it was now, another artist I follow, gosh, what's her name? I don't, she's just drawn this gorgeous zebra. And she got so hung up on which stripes are black and which stripes are white, she literally she wrote a B for black and a W for white in all of the stripes. Nothing wrong with that at all. Whatever you need to do to help yourself. You know, I know I've been on a Anne Goldberg workshop back in 2017, and she had the same thing on the baby that we were drawing. You know, she's got sort of like letters showing this bit's dark and this bit's light, and it's really helpful. It's really helpful, particularly if you've got lots and lots of shapes. So I don't work with a magnifying glass. That's the next question that's come up. No, I don't. But what I do have is I have Vari lenses. So my eyesight used to be amazing. Just going to grab some water. My eyesight used to be absolutely 20/20, which is brilliant. And then of course, the older I got, the worse it's got. So I can't see close up. Everything's really, really, really fuzzy. So I was finding it quite difficult with my drawing because I sit, probably, my nose is about 14 inches away from the paper. But there are times when I want to get really up close. And I just couldn't do it with my glasses. And I was taking my glasses off, taking them, putting them back on. And it was all getting a bit, you know, headaches, all that kind of thing. And I spoke to my optician and we came up with the Vari lenses. And they've been an absolute game changer. They took a little bit of time to get used to because they're kind of long distance at the top and magnified at the bottom. So if I want to see where I am now, I'm kind of looking through the middle, but if I want to get up close, I have to look through the bottoms of them. But they have been an absolute game changer for my drawing. They really, really have been a game changer. You know, and I haven't sort of had to worry about different glasses for, computer and this, that, and the other. They've just been fantastic. So I'd really recommend those. Really recommend them. And I know some people have them in as like a lenses as well. If you wear contact lenses, you can have the same thing again. So yeah, they're really good. So I'm just coming out to here and we're just bringing some of these little tufts in. So a little bit of grey there, a little bit of tuft in there. I'm going to come back in again afterwards with the raw umber just to bring it that little bit of sort of tanny colour in. And then you can see these little feathers are sort of coming around there. Correcting the highlight in the pupil, honestly, I wouldn't. I'd just leave it. If you've kind of made them all dark and you're like, oh, I just want to get them a little bit lighter, at this point, I would not do anything. I would just leave them because it's too small. However, if it was bigger, then what I would do is I would use an eraser. On hot press paper, I'd use an eraser, or you could use a slice tool, but the likelihood is you'll probably damage your paper if you use a slice tool. So, sometimes when you make a mistake, you're just best leaving it and just kind of working with it, and it'll be fine. This sort of size is absolutely fine. Oh gosh, this is a big question. Tips for not being a perfectionist. So, I think this is about the self-belief. I think confidence, self-belief, worrying about what others think. Gosh, this looks rubbish, what's everyone else going to think? And getting to the point where whatever you do, you absolutely just 100% love. And I think it's very much about... I have conversations in my head. I don't think I'm alone in having conversations in my head. I'm just bringing some little feathery bits in here. You can see I'm just sort of bringing a little bit more texture in. But I think a lot of us have conversations in our head, and it's I think for some people it goes along the lines of, well, that's rubbish. No, that's in the wrong place. Oh, you've got that wrong. Oh, that feather doesn't look like that. That feather looks like this. And we're too used to listening to that internal voice. And I got to a point in my life where the internal voice is there and it still says those things. But I got to a point where I don't have to believe it because it's not true. So in my head, particularly when I'm drawing live like this, my little voice, whether it's my ego or whatever it is, that's sort of just whispering, that's really rubbish. Everyone's going to think this is rubbish. Nobody's enjoying it. And, if I let that little voice kind of, take over, I would stop teaching and I'd stop drawing live. Now, I know there are some people who are going to be sitting there going, well, it is rubbish, Ronnie. And I've got to the point now where I'm like, well, I really love it. And I'm just going to listen to how I feel and all of that, because I don't want to listen to other people telling me how to feel and that I'm not good at stuff, because I've done that for a lot of my life. I listened to my art teacher when I was 17 who told me, you're no good at drawing, no good at art, you can't make a career out of it. And to be honest, I'm quite glad that they did, because it wouldn't have taken me on the route that I've gone on. But even so, it's sort of, to dash a young person's dreams like that is horrible. And I know that I'm not the only one. There's lots of people who that's, happened to. So I think it's a journey, which sounds very cliched, I know, but it's definitely a journey. And it's a journey that I've been on since probably 2016, actually, when I first started drawing, and then particularly 2020 when I met 2021 when I met my coach Susie, who kind of helped me sort of get over an awful lot of stuff. And it's that sort of inner work that makes all the difference. It really, really does make a huge difference. Reflection and all of that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I think just not listening to that little voice, I think that's an important start. Okay, so we're just going to come down here. You can see I'm bringing a little bits of brown down here. Okay, so tips for those going through the ugly stage currently. You can see I'm also going through the ugly stage. It's part of the process, it's just part of what happens. It's like when you're making a cup of tea and you first put the water in and your tea hasn't properly brewed yet and it's like really weak. It's just part of you sitting there going, that looks absolutely horrible. But you know that if you just let it brew for a little bit longer and you put the milk in and whatever, you're going to get to a point where it's a really lovely cup of tea. It's just understanding that it's part of the process. That's what's really, really important is drawing is, a lot of people think drawing is for people who are talented, and actually it's really not. It's a process. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are people who are super talented at it and who are just amazing, naturally amazing, but everybody can learn to draw because it is a process. You learn to put this colour here, that colour there, this technique, that technique, and hey presto, you've got a picture. And the way you get better is by practicing, of course, but it's a process. It's just a process. Okay, so we've done this little bit here. We're going to come back and we're going to do some more bits to it, but I want to start on this side now as well. Now this side, when you look at the wing here, it's very different in that the texture is very different. So this looks all fluffy. This looks much smoother and sleeker. So the feathers are all sort of laid on the top of each other, and we want to kind of portray that. So around the edge here, this is sort of fluffy. There's quite a lot of texture in there, and then we're just going to start to use. Can you see how my pencil strokes have gone smoother? So I'm wanting to draw a smoother texture. So my pencil strokes have changed to sort of longer, smoother pencil strokes. And then what will happen is that's the texture that I'm going to get. So instead of sort of these sort of fluffy, round and round pencil strokes, we'll just have these smooth ones. And we're going to come around these little lighter areas. And you can see I'm just using these single pencil strokes. Now, it's important that we do follow the kind of the growth of the feathers, if you like. We do follow the growth of the feathers because, that's how all of the feathers are sort of growing down and on that sort of angle. But I'm just going to use the single pencil stroke. And here, I'm going to come over with another colour as well. I'm going to use the darker colour. Try not to go too speedy. So just single pencil strokes. Try and get your pencil strokes next to each other so that, everything sort of looks uniform and smooth. That's what we're trying to get, is that sort of smoother laid out. Again, it doesn't matter if you get the feathers in slightly the wrong places. Nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to have your owl reference photo next to your drawing and go, oh, this feather's wrong, oh, that feather's wrong, unless they're not a very nice person, and then who cares? That's something that I'm quite, I've become quite sort of keen on doing, is not having horrible people, not having mean people around me. I want to surround myself with nice, kind people who kind of pick me up rather than, pull me down. And it's obviously sometimes you can't get away from being around people who aren't nice, but if you can, it's a good idea. Not to spend too much time with them, because it can really, really, it can cause all sorts of problems, and it's So surround yourself with lovely people. That's what I say. Okay. Do I need to know? Yes, it's a little owl. It's a little owl. That's what it's called, a little owl. It's found in the UK. It's I think I put quite a lot of details into the pre-prep session about it. I told you a little bit about where you can find it, all of that kind of thing. But yeah, it's called a little owl, which looks quite cute. So I kept on saying the little owl. Yes, it's a little owl, and it's a little owl. Yvonne, you've accidentally used black. Don't worry about it. Well, I keep going. You can use light pressure. What you'll be getting is a grey. So if you use black, you'll be getting like a grey colour. Keep going. Do what I'm doing here, and then we're going to get the brown, and you're going to be able to put the lighter brown over the top, and it will give it like a bit of a brownie tinge. And you've just got a darker coloured little owl, or you could be sitting in a shadow. That's the whole point. It doesn't matter. So I think it will be absolutely fine. It's like with all of the little hairs that we were seeing. Some of them were sort of slightly darker. Some of them were much lighter. It didn't matter at all. They all had their own little sort of personalities, and it was absolutely lovely to see. And that's and you can bring your own personality into drawing is so important. And you will find that your own style will start to emerge as you draw. You'll find your style will start to kind of pop out. And you might be thinking, oh no, my drawings just look the same as everybody else's, but I guarantee you look at all of the drawings in the community, and every single one is different, because every single one of us is different. We're all unique human beings. We've all got different emotions. We've all got different things going on in our lives. We all have different muscle mass, so our pressure is different. Everything's different. And you'll hear people talk about realism. All realism artists, they all look the same. They really don't. You can tell the difference between my drawings and other realism artists. You can tell the difference between all of them. And it's because we're all completely different people. And we kind of concentrate on different things, and we use our pencils in a slightly different way. And you'll find exactly the same thing. You'll find your style coming through as well. And it's just one of those things that just sort of, it starts to emerge. It's lovely. Okay, let's bring a little bit more of that dark in there. Yeah, good. Okay, right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that lighter brown. This is where, Yvonne, you're going to take this one as well. You're going to go over the top of the black, and you're going to go, oh, this looks really great. And yours will probably look even better than ours because it will be a little bit darker. So we're going to take the War Umber, that sort of greeny browny colour. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about this colour because I never used to use this colour. And now you can see it's quite little. It's one of my most used pencils. I use it in everything. And I never used to use it. And the reason why is because, look at it, it's not very pretty. It's not a very pretty colour. Why would you want to use this colour on your drawings? When you've got those gorgeous, lovely warm oranges and warm reds and all of that kind of stuff, why would you want to use something that looks like it's come out of a baby's nappy, basically? And I had some of my work critiqued back in 2019 by an amazing artist called Aaron Gadd. You might want to put it in the chat. It's Aaron. I think it's double A, might be one A, Gadd. He's an amazing colour pencil artist, and his work is like phenomenal. And I had some critiques done by him, and I sent some grey animals, and I sent the work that I was working on at that time, which was I think it was 2 chestnut animals. And he came back and he said, your grey animals are some of the best I've seen. They're amazing. He said, but your chestnut animals, you're missing a whole range of colour. And I was like, oh my goodness, what do you mean? Because of course you want everybody to say your drawings are all gorgeous, don't you? And basically, all of my chestnut animals were orange, pink, and red, and they had no balance. And he said, I want you to start using brown ochre and raw umber in your chestnut animals because they'll balance out the warmth. You'll get a little bit of green in there, and it's going to make an enormous difference. And I did, and it was like night and day. It was amazing how much it changed my work. And it's little things like that, where one person is so generous in, he was generous, I paid him to do my critiques, but, generous enough to give me some really, really great information. Which is why I always mention him when I'm talking about this colour, because he really, really helped me change things. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to glaze. So glazing is, let me just get this piece of paper, here we go. I'm going to show you. So this is glazing. You can see I'm kind of holding it on its side a little bit. This is glazing. You see, you can hardly see it. That's what glazing is. And you're just adding a little touch of colour. And I'm kind of holding my pencil like that, and I'm just sort of kind of skimming it. And I'm going over the grey bits, and I'm going over the brown bits. And we're just getting a little bit more richness. Now, there are certain colours that are amazing for bringing out richness, particularly if you're drawing things like chestnut animals or bay animals or anything that's got sort of like a little bit of orange in it, and you want it to light up a little bit. So I'm going to bring a little bit into there as well. I'm going to bring some more black in there. And those are the bright oranges. The bright oranges, when you glaze them in over the top of another colour, they lift everything underneath, and they're a game changer. But you wait until you've got all of your layers in, and then you use this technique where you just kind of glaze in the colour in, and it works so well. So I'm just kind of bringing a little bit of colour in there. I'm going to bring a little bit in there as well. Don't worry if you go a little bit too heavy-handed, you'll be fine. I'm going to go in over the top of those little bits in there. And you should, if you put the black in, you should be able to get a little bit of this coming through, and it will just like lighten it up a little bit. It will just give it a little bit of an oomph. You can go a little bit stronger if you want. If you're like, oh, actually, I think I want this a little bit stronger in there, a little bit more of that sort of nice beigey colour. Oh, okay, hang on. Does burnishing stop the colour from lifting off onto the opposite page of the sketchbook? No, so no, not necessarily. If you've got a sketchbook and you burnish, then the likelihood is you might end up going through the page if you press too hard. It's not necessarily going to stop the colour from lifting off the page. However, it will sort of push everything into the tooth, so you're less likely to get all of those little sort of white spots coming through. If you don't want, I don't use a fixative, but if you're really worried about the colour coming off, then you could use a fixative. Just be really, really careful. And then at what point do you admit you're an artist and not just a dabbler? I think that is very much personal. And personally, I did my first drawing and I called myself an artist because I'm like, I'm an artist. I've done a drawing, it's amazing, and I love it. If you're a little bit tougher on yourself, you might kind of call yourself a dabbler or whatever for months or years. But for me, I'm like, I'm going for it. I'm just going for it. If I can do some drawing, I'm an artist. I think everybody is an artist. And I don't think. I don't think there's anything wrong in calling yourself an artist. I think we all get a little bit scared of calling it. It's like, oh gosh, like that, is that inner voice again? Who am I to say that I'm an artist? Well, who are you to say that you're not an artist? So I always think as well about it as you kind of listen to that little sort of critical voice inside your head of what they're saying, and then you think, what would I do if my best friend said that to me? You'd be like, you just wouldn't, would you? You wouldn't, or you'd said that to your best friend, you just wouldn't. unless they're a really, really good friend and it was needed. Okay, so I'm going to just bring a little bit more of that raw umber down into here. I'm going to bring a little bit, glaze it around the eyes there. We need to come and do these little feet, and then we need to sort of darken everything up a little bit. So let's work on the feet now. Now, you might be looking at the feet going, oh my goodness, they look scary as anything, and they're really not. We're going to put a little bit of black in first. Oh gosh, this is a really lovely question. Mental Health Week, and in my experience, how would I describe the therapy that colour pencils gives me? I cannot tell you what colour pencils have done for me. I just can't tell you what they've done for me. So I picked them up in 2016. I had quite a stressful job. I was working abroad a little bit. My children were all, well, two of my children were kind of going through GCSEs. I think they're amazing, will probably say no anywhere. Going through sort of GCSEs, all of that kind of stuff. My marriage wasn't happy, and it was just all of it rubbish, really. And I found these pencils. Maisie actually bought them for my Christmas present in 2015, and they literally, I can't tell you what they did. Well, I can tell you what they did. They stopped all of the rubbish that was going on in my head, all of the anxiety, all of that. Just, it kind of, when I was colouring and drawing, it stopped. It just stopped. And it was amazing. It was amazing. To have that, it's all very well having little sort of chats in your head, but to have a constant anxiety and worry and all of that kind of stuff, it's just not very nice at all, just having that constant. And I know a lot of you will be like, yeah, I know, I have all of that. Okay, let's move on to the warm grey, the light fast warm grey. And that's what colour pencils did for me. It stopped all of that rubbish that was going on, and it was just amazing. So what we're going to do here is, we're just going to go round and round on these little feet. That's all we're going to do. So we're going to start up here, we're just going to go round and round. Now these circles don't have to close, they can be sort of slightly open. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of green in over the top. So we're just going to go round and round, and then we're going to add the little bits of shading and shadow, which will make them look like feet. And then we're going to come on this one as well. So just round and round, and then down to this funny little claw, round and round in here. And then this is weird, it's got this little toe stuck up in there. Okay, and then we're going to use the earth green. Oh, maybe that's a little bit. Sorry, we don't. I'm going to use the earth green, and we're just going to bring a little bit of that earth green in. Just where you sort of think, oh, that looks a little bit greeny there, that looks a little bit greeny there, and going to bring a little bit into there, and then I'm going to bring some sort of darker grey into there as well, and I'm going to bring a little bit of earth green into here. Now I've done in the pre-recorded, in the pre-prep session that you had yesterday, I gave you a little portion of the barn owl that I've got in Ignite, and that has got some of the feet and how I did the feet. And they might look really tricky, but actually, once you kind of get an idea of how value and everything like that works, way easier, way easier. Okay, let's now use the dark sepia. And we're just going to bring in these, again, these little sort of areas of value. So when I say areas of value, just the little sort of shady parts. You can see here where there's looks like a little bit of tendon on the owl's foot there. It's a little bit here where it sort of gets a little bit darker when the foot hits the branch. And we don't have to get it exactly perfectly right, but just around here as well, around the edge. Does using cheaper paper make colours less vibrant? Well, it depends. You can use a cheap paper and it actually be pretty good for colour pencils. You could use a really expensive paper and it'd be rubbish for colour pencils. So it's just about finding the right paper that you like. Generally, I would say, when in the beginning, spend more on your paper than you do on your pencils. Just because, if there's a paper that people recommend, like Pastel Mat or Drafting Film, or I particularly like this one, the Rising Museum Board. I find it better to splash out on the surface and get more budget pencils, and then once you're sort of at a point where you've got a little bit more budget to spend, then you can splash out a little bit more on the pencils. But that's how I see it, because if you've got a really, really cheap paper that's rubbish and really great pencils, you're still going to sort of like have a little bit of a challenge, really. Darcy, age 10. Hi, Darcy. How did I feel when I finished my first proper drawing? I felt absolutely amazing. I'm going to show you my first proper drawing now, because I felt absolutely amazing. I was so in love with it, and I showed it to everybody. This is it here. That's, I can't remember what she was called. She was called Betsy or something like that, I think. And that was my first proper drawing that I did, and I was absolutely in love with it, and I was so proud of it that I was showing everybody. It's like, look what I've done. And off that drawing, I got more and more commissions from it. And I actually had a friend of mine say to me, it's good, but I think you should put some bone structure and all of that kind of stuff in. And I got really, really upset. I was like, I love why would I want to change it? And then I kind of thought about what she said, and then I was like, yeah, maybe I will. So then I did, and then let's see if I can find the next one that I did. The one I did after that was, I think I've got it here. Yes, here. So this was the one that I did just about a month after. It's a bit dark, but I really concentrated on the lights and the darks and the bone structure. And just straight away, I was like, I get it. And it just had that one person saying, oh, just concentrate on the bone structure and stuff. And that had a big impact on me. Right. So we're going to go back to the brown, the natural brown. We're just going to put a little bit of the bark in. In fact, have your warm grey, the light fast warm grey at the ready as well. And we're just going to put a little bit of the bark in, and then we're going to come back to the owl, and we're just going to start to tweak it a little bit, darken it up. So the warm natural brown is the first one we're going to use. We're just going to bring a little bit. So I'm just holding it like this, and I'm just sort of sweeping it across. Now you can spend time if you want, and you can create, really fantastic realistic bark. Or you can just do what I'm doing and just sort of sweep it across. You've got a little bit of